Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a baseball coach, a lifelong baseball fan, former player, loves everything baseball, whether it's watching baseball, playing baseball, analyzing baseball, just talking about baseball. Today, I am broadcasting from the St. Louis Arch, and joining me to discuss the St. Louis Cardinals is Charlie Ferreira. You can find him on Twitter at SirCharles_OG. Charlie played baseball through high school, hit a couple home runs in his high school career. It's more than I can say about my high school career, although I may have stolen a few more bags than you.
I guarantee it.
One of those home runs was a grand slam. Was that on a 3-0 pitch, Charlie?
I think it was full count, so
Oh,
I think it's
okay.
fair game.
A lifelong Cardinals fan, even though he's from Los Angeles. I went to college at Washington State and law school at Santa Clara. He's an attorney. Charlie, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Billy. It's good to be here. You gotta love the view from the arch. You can see the stadium from here. It's just a lovely place to be.
One of the few places where you can, see a baseball game right now since you can't get into the stadium. And we're talking about the Cardinals. They began play way back in 1881 as the St. Louis Browns. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I know there was a team named the St. Louis Browns from St. Louis, but I did not realize that the Cardinals were the Browns
Yeah,
before that.
they were. There was a barnstorming team that was purchased. They were the Brown Stockings, as you mentioned. That St. Louis Browns. They're not to be confused with that St. Louis Browns, which is kind of funny because a couple weeks ago on the program we were discussing the Cubs, who were originally the White Stockings, not to be confused with the White Sox. So these teams with long histories, as that identified as a certain name, had a different name, which then became a name of a different team in the same city. So they were that the Browns. They were a charter member of the American Association, and they played, circling back to those White Stockings, they played the Chicago White Stockings in a couple of those championship tournaments, and that kind of helped spark that Cards-Cubs rivalry. They moved to the National League in 1892. They were also called the Perfectos. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, you gotta miss those good names, though. I mean, the Perfectos, like the Cleveland Spiders. Those 1900s teams had some really good names.
Well, maybe with some teams changing names, we can bring some of those back. They were named the Cardinals in 1900. Do you know what sparked the name of the Cardinals?
I don't.
It's not the bird.
Well, I'm assuming in St. Louis it also has to do with Catholicism.
It's the color. The color red. I guess somebody commented what a lovely shade of cardinal on the uniform, and it was in the newspapers, and people picked it up and ran with it. And so yeah, they were renamed the Cardinals in 1900.
Okay.
They played in Sportsman Park from 1920 to 1966, but that stadium had a new name starting in 1953 when Anheuser-Busch bought the team around that time. What did they name the stadium? Do you know what they wanted to name the stadium?
I don't.
It was, I think they wanted to name it like Budweiser Stadium or something, but commissioner would not allow them to name the stadium after a brand, which is kind of ironic considering, pretty much.
Yeah, I guess Wrigley Field would have been named after the family and not the brand.
Correct. But, so many stadiums now, they're all named after, they all have naming rights. So they could not name it after that. So they named it Busch Stadium after the family name. And then they created
Busch Beer.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of work around to get that. So they played in that. Then they built another stadium in 1966, Busch Memorial Stadium, Busch 2. Mm-hmm. They played there until 2005. And in 2006, they started playing in Busch Stadium 3. So...
yeah, built on the same location. I was there in 2005 when they were building the new stadium, and half of the stadium was being built on top of the old stadium. It was very weird, but the new stadium is beautiful. and it's good to see them not play in a concrete bunker anymore.
Yeah, and you got to appreciate them just naming the stadium the same name, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's
The next one's got to be your favorite, though, right?
Which one?
Well, this one's not going to last forever, and they're going to build Busch 4.
That's true.
Yeah.
As a fourth myself, being Busch Stadium 4 just means that much more to me.
So now back to the Cardinals. They have in this time period, going back in the past 25 years, they've got several division titles, several postseason appearances. They won the Central in 1996, 2000, 02, 04, 05, 06, 09, 2013, 14, 15, and 19. And they also won the wild card in 01, 2011, and 2012. So we're looking at
14 times in the playoffs in 25 years, and you got 11 division titles. I can't imagine many more teams in the National League have that.
Yeah, I know, the Braves had those 14 in a row. Then recent, I think they've got the last 2. The Dodgers had 7 in a row, current streak is 7 in a row. And I think they had 2 prior in like 08 and 09, and then maybe 95. So that would put the Dodgers at, around 10. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's
definitely been one good team in each division over the last 25 years.
No doubt, and the Cardinals have been that team in the Central. As we're wrapping up our National League Central roundup here with the Cardinals. So with all those playoff appearances, they've won the NL pennant in 04, 06, 2011, and 2013. And they won the World Series twice in 06, despite a 83 and 78 regular season record. They got into the playoffs.
Yeah, that was the year with Wainwright up against the Mets.
That's
in
right.
The 9th inning, where Yadier Molina hits the home run,
Mm-hmm.
and then Wainwright throws that curveball to Carlos Beltran. And
I think there's 3 of them, right?
Yeah, it was dirty to do that to Carlos Beltran. But the Cardinals went on to win the series that year against the Tigers.
Yes.
And the rest is history from there, man.
Mm-hmm. And then they also won in 2011. And their previous titles are 1926, 31, 34, 42, 44, 46, 64, 67, and 82. So 11 titles. It's the most in the National League, second only to the Yankees. It's a distant second, but it's very impressive. So the Cardinals, they're one of those great teams, and we've definitely seen it in recent history. Must be nice to be a fan of that team who's constantly...
Yeah, and you're forgetting one. You're not forgetting one, but in 85, when they played the Royals and Don Deckinger stole one from the Cardinals, so it really should be one extra on there. No one's salty about that at all.
That was referring to the play at first base, the ground ball to the first baseman with the pitcher covering, right? That was Game 6.
Game 6.
And it would have ended the game and the series, right?
Yes.
And then he was called safe.
In Kansas City.
And Kansas City went on to win that game and the series.
And they won Game 7 pretty easily after that.
Did Saberhagen pitch Game 7?
Yes.
That was, in Saberhagen's prime. So, 11 could be 12, almost 12, but I wouldn't be complaining too much after that, winning that World Series with that 83 and 78 record.
Yeah, that's true. You lose one, but we got one back.
Yeah, it all evens out in the end, so rich history there. I'm excited to talk about these Cardinals here.
Yeah, they're a great team. I'm a little biased, but I do think they're the best team in the last 25 years in the National League. So we will see how your roster stacks up to mine.
All right, looking forward to it. Last week on the program, we talked about the Brewers, and the trivia question was, who is the career stolen base leader for the Brewers? And Kyle Loebner, guest on the show, was so confident in his answer that he chose not to answer, to let our listeners, so that they were not affected by his answer, and they could throw out a guess there. And he told me off air, and he absolutely was correct. So he really knows his Brewers stuff. But I'll throw this one to you, Charlie, before I reveal the answer. So who is the career stolen base leader for the Brewers? Do you have a guess on that?
Yeah, so listening last week, I know Kyle said basically it's not Robin Young. So that's the obvious guess. I can't go there. My guess is probably going to be someone like Carlos Gomez or Ricky Weeks, someone who played there a while. I'm going to go with Weeks because he played longer.
Okay, good guess. But yeah, this one surprised me, and it's kind of why I had it as a trivia question. Paul Molitor.
Really?
Yeah. He had, I think, like over 400 stolen bases as a Brewer.
That's impressive.
And I think like over 500 career. As I look it up, yeah, he had 504 stolen bases career. 412 came with the Brewers. So, yeah, that was kind of why I pulled that one. Don't expect Molitor to be such a great base stealer.
No, but he got on all the time, and I assume he's one of those guys, like when Albert Pujols was playing with the Cardinals, he ran like he was invisible. So, Molitor played for forever for the Brewers, so that makes sense.
He had multiple 40 steal seasons.
Wow.
Yeah. So now getting to this week's trivia question about the Cardinals. So we just mentioned that the Cardinals won the World Series twice in this span, and they went to the World Series 4 times in this span. But the 2 times they won it in 2006 and 2011. Who were the 2 World Series MVPs for the Cardinals? So Charlie, I'll offer that as a guess. See if you can throw a guess out there.
Well, I think I know one of them.
I'm guessing you know 2011.
2011. He's a Cardinal legend. So
you can keep 2011 in your back pocket.
So 2006, I want to say it was a pitcher because that team. Actually, I'm lying. I want to guess Scott Rowland.
Okay, Rollins your guess of 2006. You're keeping 2011 in your back pocket since you know that one, and you want our listeners to be able to throw out guesses there without being...
I want to give you guys a chance.
Exactly. So listeners out there, if you want to throw those guesses out there, send me a tweet at me, send a message on Instagram. It's at Box Seat Banter on both of those platforms. So now, let's talk about some of the owners that they've had. They were owned, as we mentioned, by the Anheuser-Busch Corporation family from 1953 to 1996.
Yeah, they were good owners. I mean, considering they're corporate owners, and some of the owners we have now that are corporate aren't exactly the ones you want owning your team, the team was super competitive during that time. Even if they played in a stadium that wasn't conducive to winning, I mean, they always played well. They always hired well. They let their general managers run the team, which is a blessing for franchises like St. Louis who didn't have the biggest payroll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, was it when they bought the team, or was it when they sold the team? I forget which one. They wanted it to be sold to to somebody who would keep it in St. Louis. I know I kind of came across that in my research.
Yeah, I'm sure that was why they sold it to the next owners, because it would be insane to move the Cardinals from St. Louis. They would never have a fan base like that in another city. But the Bushes were good to the city, and Gussie Busch was well known for being a baseball loving owner.
And yeah, they're still tied to the team, playing there in Busch Stadium, even that new Busch Stadium. Several years after they sold the team, and they sold the team to Bill DeWitt Jr., who bought it in '96. He's been in the news recently talking about the profits that baseball owners make. But how's he been as an owner?
He's been good. I mean, as we'll see when we go through the GMs and managers, we haven't had that many. And he lets the GMs and the coaches cook, and he hires good people. So I can't complain, even though he's kind of commercialized the team a little bit. I mean, you got that center field mall. I mean, it's beautiful, but it can be seen as something that takes away from the experience of the game itself. But he's making money, and I don't know why he would complain about making profits in St. Louis.
Yeah, and yeah, you talk about that stability. I know, I forget which team we were talking about, but when Terry DeWan was on the program, he kind of referenced the Pittsburgh Steelers, how, you know, how many coaches have they had, and they've had such stability, and that's why they've been so good. You look at, you know, the Dodgers in their first 40 years in LA, they had 2 managers, and, you know, they were widely successful. So, you know, you get somebody who knows what they're doing, and you put them in charge, and you let them work.
Yeah, and it helps that like teams like the Dodgers, the Steelers have. I mean, the Dodgers for 40 years had one owner. The Steelers have one owner.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the right owner, it works out for you. If you have an owner like, let's say Jerry Jones, and he's has his fingers in the pie sometimes, you will end up having issues with the on-field play.
Mm-hmm. And so let's look at who those owners have put in charge. Walt Jocketty was the GM from 94 to 07. So a long run there. He won that World Series in 06. And he's familiar with the National League Central. I think he had time with the Reds.
Yeah. He's a National League Central lifer. He made some great trades. I mean, guys like Edmonds, Roland. He signed Chris Carpenter. He drafted Albert Pujols in the 15th round. A lot of GMs don't make moves like that, and he did really well, and he's forever linked with La Russa in my mind because they both work together so well.
Mm-hmm. And then John Mozeliak took over as GM from 07 to 2017. He's currently the president of baseball operations, and Mike Gersh has been the general manager since 2017. So, you know, but really between Jocketty and John Mozeliak, you know, really 2 guys in charge over this whole 25-year period. So again, we look at that stability that the Cardinals have had.
Yeah, the one black mark on Mozeliak's record is when our general management department decided to hack the Astros. That wasn't ideal. He managed to survive that and didn't take much punishment for that, and maybe he should have.
Yeah, and his former subordinate, who went to the Astros, he's recently had to wear the punishment.
Yeah. Jeff Lunau has been wearing punishment too. So there's been some negative space there for the Mozeliak.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now one of my favorite parts of the program, quizzing you on the managers. So they had a manager who won the Most Valuable Player award as a Cardinal when he led the league in hits, RBI, batting average. He had 363 and total bases.
Yeah, he's an impressive manager. You might know him from the New York Yankees. That'll be Joe Torre.
Joe Torre managed the squad from 90 to 95. Not the most successful run there for Torre. And yeah, when he went to New York, he was kind of thought of as a retread hire there in New York, and turned out to be a great hire. But yeah, 5-year run there, got fired in 95, I think early in 95.
Yeah, he's like Bill Belichick. He needs some time with the Browns in order to make the Patriots a good team.
That's right. And then they had a manager who was, as a player, he was beaned, missed a month due to concussions in the aftermath of the beaning, and he was found to have a blood clot in his head. It could have possibly killed him, but luckily they found it. Then eventually he went on to become a manager. So do you know who that would be?
Yeah, that's the current manager of the Kansas City Royals, Mike Matheny.
Mm-mm.
It is not.
He
had concussion issues too.
He had concussion issues, not from a beat. That was more the catcher, wearing the foul tips.
So then it would have to be Tony La Russa.
Nah, I got you. See, I threw one in here.
Threw one, an oldie inmate.
Well, it was from 95, but it was not a... He picked up for Joe Torre in 95, Mike Jorgensen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see that one? I did not know. Interim coaches were not on my study page.
I had to throw another one in here because they've had so few. This next manager, he's third all-time in wins behind Connie Mack and John McGraw. He's one of 2, along with Connie Mack, to manage 5,000 games.
Yeah, that has to be Tony La Russa. He's the legend. He got to handpick his successor, and now he was president of the Diamondbacks for a while, and he's just an all-round winner. I mean, he won in Oakland, he won in Chicago for the White Sox, and then, or he was in White Sox, then Oakland, and then for St. Louis. So I can't say enough about him. He has some interesting ways of managing that definitely would not work in today's game.
Well, he kind of changed the game too, with relievers, the matchups that.
Yeah, I mean, he loved bringing in. He was one of the first guys to bring in the one out lefty or the one batter lefty, and he didn't care how long the game went as long as he won.
Yeah, so he managed the squad from '96 to 2011. So he won the World Series there in '06 and in 2011 with the team. And, so in doing so, he won World Series titles in both leagues since he had previously won with Oakland in '89. So now we come to a manager who, after his playing days, had an unprofitable real estate ventures that left him in debt. And he was also a 4-time Gold Glover.
Yeah, that's Mike Matheny, former catcher.
And yeah, as you mentioned, he had his playing career to cut short a little bit due to those concussions. So great defender there, but the catchers, they really got aware with all those foul tips and everything. But he managed the Cardinals from 2012 to 2018. What do you think about Matheny as a manager?
He could be frustrating at times. He was very good at certain things. Clubhouse things were not good. If you remember, what was it, last year, 2 years ago, one of the relievers was complaining because he was being hazed in the dugout in the clubhouse. So he had issues in the clubhouse, but he did pretty well on the field. Some of his relievers that he brought in, it kind of felt like he was trying to be Tony La Russa and wasn't. But from what I hear, now that he's in Kansas City, he's kind of embraced more of the sabermetric role, and they seem to love him there so far.
All right, that brings us to our current manager, who is a manager despite no professional baseball playing experience, which, you see some guys who didn't reach the majors, but they at least played in the minors. This guy, no professional baseball playing experience at all. And who would that be?
That's Mike Schill.
That's the current manager who's been there since 2018. I think he took over in an interim position in 2018 for Matheny, and then he was made the full-time manager. So how do you think he's done as a manager? Now, he might be someone who you would think might not be as good in the clubhouse since he doesn't have that playing experience. But has that been the case?
No, he's been a player's manager. He might not have the playing experience, but he knows the emotions better. He's dealt with a hell of a season this year. I mean, I think it's been 13 players in the first week that they've had make debuts, mostly relievers. I mean, they're going to play 55 games in 45 days.
Hopefully.
I mean, if the Reds aren't playing, then we'll see. And he's been good so far. He took us to the pennant, or to the NLCS last year, even though that team had no business playing in the NLCS, as you saw on field. So he's been good. He's an overachiever, and that works well in St. Louis.
All right, so that's the managers, and then shortly here we will look at the roster. Now it is time to look at the roster that I've created, so a quick reminder for all the listeners out there. You go back 25 years, so we're going back to 1995. You pick one player per year. You cannot repeat players, and you must form a coherent roster. And if I inspire you and you want to create your own roster, you can go ahead and visit the website, boxseatbanter.com. There's a link there to a Google spreadsheet, which you can download a template to create your own roster. And if you do, I would love to see that. Please submit those. But without further ado, let's get to my Cardinals roster. And we started off at the catching position. And there's really only one guy who's going to be the starting catcher for the Cardinals in the past quarter century, and that's Yadier Molina. I got him in 2012. Yeah. He was worth 7.2 wins.
Yeah, I mean, he hit the ball. He stole bases. He's a Molina who stole bases. So that automatically has to put you in the top whatever of catchers in history. He was an all-star that year, and I assume we'll get to this later, but I want to talk about his Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's later on the program. We'll get to that. But that's a great point. Yeah, as you mentioned, All-Star that year, Gold Glover. Obviously, his defense has always been phenomenal. This is one of his top offensive years. Hit 22 home runs, hit over 300, slugged 500. So
yeah, they ran into the Giants that year, or else they might have won the title.
Yeah, two-way player though for sure that year. Phenomenal defender and just long-time catcher, very consistent back there. I think getting to first, they've got some depth at first base. I'm going Albert Pujols in 2006. He led the league in WAR, worth 8.5 wins. Lots of extra base hits, 33 doubles, 49 home runs, drove in 137. He led the league in slugging, OPS, and OPS plus. He slugged 671. Wow. And
he was, it's Albert Pujols. There's a reason why the Angels paid what they did for an inferior product, but they paid what they could. He also, I really thought about taking him in different positions.
Yeah, I looked at, early in his career when he played some left and he played some third. But it just, I don't feel like the offensive numbers were as great in some of those years. But yeah, that would have been, a nice move if you can get him there. I just don't think it worked out with those years. But
yeah, and also the Cardinals are so strong up and down this lineup that you didn't need to be funny with his position. He's a first baseman. He was a Gold Glove at the first base. Just let him cook.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, the Angels overpaying for him. This was the production they paid for. They paid for past performance, and it was some phenomenal performance back that he had in St. Louis.
Yeah, Artie Moreno loves that.
Moving along to second base, this is, I don't know if I got the best year, but Matt Carpenter, the left-handed batter from 2018, worth 4.9 wins, hit 36 home runs, 42 doubles. The batting average not the best, but he did get on base, walked over 100 times. OPS of just a shade under 900.
Yeah, and 2018 was right when the 3 true outcomes was starting to become a thing, and he really took it to heart. He also started hitting way more fly balls that year. So, you could tell he hit 34 home runs, 36 home runs and 42 doubles. So he was getting the ball in the air, and it worked.
Mm-hmm. And then now on the other side of the diamond at third base, Scott Rowland in 2004. He was worth 9.2 wins. Wow. Defensively, he was worth 3.3 with the glove. Hit over 30 doubles, over 30 home runs, drove in over 120. Triple slash line, 314, 409, 598 slugging. So, you're getting great on base, great power, and great defense out of your third baseman.
Yeah, so, Scott Rowland was amazing that year. So I pulled up the NL MVP voting for that year because you would think 9.2 WAR, great defense. He was fourth in the NL MVP voting that year, mostly because Albert Pujols and Jim Edmonds were 3, 4, and 5. And also Barry Bonds was still playing baseball, unfortunately.
Well, in 2004, I believe Beltre had a monster year in LA that year.
Yeah. Barry Bonds was first, Beltre was second. Scott Rowland with a 9.2 WAR, batting 314 and a great glove, got 1 first place vote.
Yeah, which is crazy. And I think Beltre was worth 9.6 wins that year. So stacked third base position that year. That could win it, a lot of years, but that year was tough competition. And then as we finish up the infield at shortstop, Edgar Renteria in 2003, he was worth 5.6 wins, 13 home runs, 47 doubles, swiped 34 bags, hit 330, 394, 480. So again, you're getting great offensive production out of a defense first position. He was an all-star, Gold Glover, and Silver Slugger that year.
Yeah, as your friend would say, he's Edgar Renteria, the man from Barranquilla. And he was just one of those guys. You remember him from the Marlins.
Mm-hmm.
He got that single that brought up Council.
Mm-hmm.
and he was a gamer, and he played great defense, and he was just a great shortstop for the Cardinals, who have had a few good shortstops over the last 25 years.
Especially if you go back a little farther.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you could go back 40 years, then we'd be having a different conversation. But Edgar Rennery is a good pick here.
Mm-hmm. Then as we get to the outfield, I went with Tommy Pham in left in 2017. He was worth over 6 wins, over 20 doubles, 20 home runs. Solid defender out there. He good on base skills. Got on base at a 4.11 clip. Then as we get to center field, Jim Edmonds in 2000, he was worth 6.3. Hit 42 home runs, drove in over 100.
I feel like he was one of those guys kind of in the Andrew Jones mold who hit really well, but in the field, everyone thought he was the best fielder ever. But he kind of made the flashy play and didn't look that great. I mean, his defensive WAR that year is only .4. I mean, he still won the Gold Glove mostly because he batted .295. You know how that works. But he is the best Cardinal center fielder in the last 25 years. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, so I mean, great production. You hit 42 home runs, again, out of a defense-first position like center field. It's very impressive. But yeah, I agree with you. His defense, I believe, is overrated. He made the flashy play, but I feel like, which he was very good at. Don't get me wrong, it's impressive to make those diving plays, but I think a lot of other guys would make some of those plays standing up.
Yeah, well, there's a couple where the one where he dove straight back in center field. It's incredible to watch him, and you remember those kind of plays more than you remember the guy who throws it out at third. So he was a great fielder, but he wasn't. I don't think he was Gold Glove caliber per se, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think the best defenders are the ones who make it look easy.
Right.
Then as we get to right field, J.D. Drew.
Easy. J.D. Drew.
J.D. Drew from 01. He was worth 5.5 wins, 27 home runs, 18 doubles. Somewhat of an abbreviated season there. I don't know if it was due to injury. He always seemed like a bit of a fragile player.
I'll just say J.D. Drew was not a fan favorite in St. Louis.
I don't know if J.D. Drew's ever been a fan favorite.
He managed to make St. Louis fans more mad than just about any other fan base. And considering St. Louis fans would die for some of their players, that's tough. But he was a great hitter. He was one of those on-base percentage guys that were early, just got on base, and nobody respected that back when he was playing.
Yeah, and an OPS of over 1,000, so when he did play that year, he was very productive at the plate. Then as we get to the bench, we've got backup infielder Johnny Peralta from 2014, 21 home runs, 38 doubles out of him. Hit 263, 336, 443. Solid with the glove there at short with 2.5 wins on defense.
Yeah, Johnny Peralta was fine. He was fine. He's not the best shortstop ever. 5.8, he could hit. That's about it.
And then the other backup infielder comes from that position of depth that we mentioned earlier, Mark McGwire in 1998, as he broke the home run record with 70 bombs. He led the league there. He led the league in walks with 162. He also led the league in on base at 470, in slugging at 752, and an OPS at 1222, and an OPS plus at 216.
Yeah,
wow.
Two things about this. I don't think any other team would. Does Mark McGwire? I mean, 1998 Mark McGwire was one of the best seasons ever. Nah, he doesn't start. Second, he didn't even win the MVP that year. Sammy Sosa goes on to win the MVP that year, even though he had 50 more at-bats than Mark McGwire and still had fewer home runs. It boggles the mind. I guess the Cubs had a better record that year.
I know the Cubs were the wild card team.
Yeah, so that's why Mark McGwire. I don't even think the Cardinals made the playoffs that year. So it's one of those seasons that will go down in history, even if there's an asterisk next to it.
Mm-hmm. And he was worth 7.5 wins. Would have been worth some more if he had any value defensively. He was negative 2.6 with the glove that year. But he was an all-star, was a silver slugger, came up a little short in that MVP voting. As we move along to the outfield bench, I got Ray Lankford in 97. hit 31 home runs, 36 doubles. He was almost a 3-4-5 triple slash guy. He was an all-star for them that year.
Yeah, good player. He had a better year the next year, but you can't beat Mark McGwire in 98.
And then Ryan Ludwig in 08, I think one of the few throw left, bat right guys around. But he had some power in that brief heyday that he had. He had 37 home runs, 40 doubles.
Yeah, he had a year or two there where he was really good. Then he got hurt, and that was it for him.
And then finishing up the bench with the backup catcher. I had to go way back to 96 to find Tom Pagnozzi. And, he was slightly below average with the stick, OPS plus of 93, but he was solid with the glove. But with, Yachty being so,
That's a Tony La Russa special there. He doesn't care if the catcher hits, but as long as you get that pitching staff to play well and he can block a ball, he's going to be playing for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, and as a backup catcher, that's really all you can ask for. So what do you think of this this lineup that I've put together for the Cardinals?
I agree with most of it. There's a couple, we disagree on some things. We'll get to that later, but
yeah, I understand you made a roster, so when we go over the tough decisions, you can point out all my mistakes since you've got the more Cardinals knowledge than I do.
I wouldn't call them mistakes. I would call them difference of opinion.
Okay.
But, it's a great lineup. Most teams can't say they have this many all-stars, this many, not Hall of Famers, but Hall of very good players that come in. They only have one true all-star, Hall of Famer, but a lot of these guys are in the Hall of Very Good.
Yeah, I can agree with that. McGwire probably would be there if it weren't for the performance-enhancing things that he took. Although if he didn't take those, then he might not be Hall of Fame worthy, and that's why he has not been admitted yet. So now let's get to the pitching staff. And I'll start it off with Chris Carpenter in 09. He led the league in ERA that year at about 2.25. He went 17-4. Not a huge strikeout guy, but he knew how to pitch. ERA plus of 182, which led the league, and he kept it in the yard. Just gave up .3 home runs per 9, which also led the league.
No, he was good. There's no doubt about it. It's not his Cy Young year, but he was a very good pitcher for a very long time.
And then, when did he win the Cy Young?
I think it was 05.
Okay. And then I've got Adam Wainwright in 2010. He went 20-11, had an ERA under 2.5 in about 230 innings. So you need to get a workhorse out of him. Struck out over 200, ERA plus of 160. He was an all-star that year.
Can't do a Cardinals. He won 20 games too. So you can't do a Cardinals pitching staff without putting Wainwright on there. He might even be one of their best 5 pitchers all time.
Probably. He's had a long career. He's still pitching and still doing well, still getting guys out with that big curveball of his. John Lackey in 2015, he went 13-10, sub-3 ERA at 2.77. He's dependable. 33 starts, which led the league. He's always been a pretty durable pitcher, over 200 innings. He's been around. He's pitched some big moments.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you could thank the Angels again. They let him go as a free agent for some reason. Then we traded him from the Red Sox for Joe Kelly and Alan Craig, and then he only had a 1-year contract when they traded for him, which is not something you usually do with a pitcher. But that's the year where they went on a run, and John Lackey was just he's always been a gamer.
And then Carlos Martinez in 2016 went 16-9, ERA of 3.04. Struck out 8 guys per 9. Go ahead.
He's a guy with one of those changeups that people cannot hit.
Like throws Ched too. He can run it up there in the high 90s. But he's a guy that seems like he's always kind of been on the cusp of being really good, but hasn't been able to do it consistently.
Yeah, the next guy you have on your roster here, that's what we were hoping for, and he never quite got there.
Yeah, and then next guy is Jack Flaherty, a young pitcher. So just last year, 2019, I got him. He was worth 5.8 wins. He went 11-8 with a 2.75 ERA and just under 200 innings. Had an ERA plus of 155. Led the league in WHIP and hits per nine. Just 6.2 hits per nine, a sub 1 WHIP. And I mean, he struck out 10.6 batters per nine.
He had a great second half last year. He didn't
Huge
start
second
that
half.
well, and I got to see one game of his, and it was the one loss. So that was disappointing, but he was just on fire, and we hope that he can continue to play. He's definitely the future of the franchise.
So yeah, that's the rotation that I've got there. It's some very good pitchers. I don't know who's the true ace of that.
Well, even when Carpenter and Wainwright were on the rotation together, they never had a true ace. So I'm sure both of them would say it was them. Cardinals pitching philosophy is more to have 5 good starters than to have 1 good starter. So this makes sense. They have a bunch of really solid starters, and that's how they've been a good team for the last 25 years.
Now let's look at the bullpen. I got Tom Henke in 1995. He had a sub-2 ERA, 1.82 in 54 and a third innings. He had 36 saves that year. ERA plus of 2.29. He was an all-star for them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I know much about Tom Henke, but he was an all-star reliever with a 2.3 WAR. That deserves to be on the list.
Then Heathcliff Slocum in 99. I believe he started that year in Baltimore and was like terrible. They got rid of him, and then St. Louis signs him, and he pitched great for them. 2.36 ERA across 53 and a third innings. ERA plus of 196.
Yeah, he's just a great baseball name, too. Heathcliff Slocum.
That's an 80 grade name.
Yes.
Mike Crudell in 02. Sub-2 ERA in 52 and 2/3 innings. Not a lot of heavy usage out of these relievers here. ERA plus of 2.14.
Yeah, we're used to today's game where these relievers are in there every game. So
it's that La Russa, way of utilizing the bullpen, right?
Yeah, you got to spread out the innings.
Jason Isringhausen in 05. He just went 1-2, but his ERA 2.14. Saved 39 games, 59 innings, had an ERA plus of 199. Not huge strikeout numbers for many of these relievers, but they get the job done.
Yep.
Russ Springer in 07. He went 8-1 out of the pen. Wow. Racking up a bunch of vulture wins, I'm not sure. 66 innings for him. ERA plus of 2.02. And Kevin Segras, the lefty, in 2013, he was, I think it was after Tony La Russa, but he was managed like he was used like he was managed by Tony La Russa. He had 45 appearances, 39 and 2/3 innings, and ERA under half a run.
Yeah, I think that has to be a typo, right? Like 0.45, but no, he was really that good that year. He's one of those lookies that just got lefties out, and that's all he was in there for.
Yeah, and then we'll finish up the pitching staff with Fernando Salas from 2011. He had the most innings in the pen with 75 innings in 68 games. He saved 24 games, ERA of 2.28. So
yeah, he was a big part of that championship team. That they needed good bullpen guys, and he came through in the clutch.
Yeah, so who, with this pen, who are you giving the ball to with the game on the line in the 9th inning?
The only true closer, well, not the only true closer, but the big name here is Jason Isringhausen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I want to give him the ball, though. He doesn't strike enough guys out. So one of these guys that gets a lot of strikeouts. Maybe Russ Springer. He had a really good year that year, even though he never really came into ninth.
Mm-hmm. You could cheat and say Wainwright based on that.
That's true.
that 06. Who you start in Game 7 if you had any of these pitchers at your disposal?
Well, the one with the best track record for the Cardinals is Adam Wainwright.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he's always been there. He's always been very good. And he also, if it's a National League game in 2009, the guy can hit.
Yeah.
So he's valuable all over the field.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's the roster I've assembled. Again, if you want to make your own, I would love to see it. Also, if you want to point out any disagreements that you have, we'll point out some disagreements that we have shortly, but you can reach out to me on Twitter, on Instagram, and let me know what you think of it. Every week, my guest is able to point out some mistakes that I've made, but this week, my guest has also provided his own roster. So Charlie, let's quickly go over your roster and we can see any differences that we have between yours and mine.
Sure. So for the infield, we have the same players. It's Molina, Pujols, Carpenter, Roland, Renneria. Now we disagree on some of the years. I believe we have the same Molina year, but Pujols, I have 07. You have 06.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, picking an Albert Pujols year is like picking a fine wine. If you know the good years,
can't go wrong as long as you get them with the Cards and not the Angels, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it has to be a vintage Pujols year, not a new one. Carpenter, I had a little earlier than you, 2013. That was his breakout season.
Mm-hmm.
He really played well. In 2013, he was an all-star, fourth in MVP voting. He just hit the ball really well. Led the league in runs, hits, and doubles. What more can I say? Scotty Rowland, great fielder, same guy. Renneria, same guy. Matt Holliday out in left field.
Yeah, that was definitely a player that I wanted to get on the roster, but just didn't line up with the years. Although, at least I won't have to worry about him being a liability out in left field.
Yeah. There was that one game in Dodger Stadium where he lost that in the lights, and it was not pretty. And
it was not a night game either.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But he could hit, he could mash. Even, he mashed in Colorado, and then he goes to St. Louis, and he proved that he was not Coors Field, that he was not a product of Coors Field.
And it's funny because at Coors Field, he was hitting 50 home runs a year. He gets to St. Louis, and he doesn't do that, and I, for some reason, was disappointed. But then I went over the stats today, I'm like, holy cow, that guy can hit.
Yeah.
He can't field, he'd be a DH now. But I had to start him, especially over Tommy Pham, who only played for the Cardinals a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jim Edmonds in center, gotta have him. And then in right field, we had another disagreement. I have Brian Jordan out in right field.
Yeah, Brian Jordan, phenomenal athlete. Played in the NFL. People kind of forget how great of an athlete he was. But yeah, he was. I think the cleanup hitter behind McGuire. I mean, McGuire was hitting 70 home runs.
Yeah, he was great. He had 5 interceptions in the NFL in 2 years, and then went on to be an excellent baseball player. Not many guys can say that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Mark McGuire has to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I had Tommy Pham on my roster. He just didn't make the starting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
I had Ray Langford on my roster. He's a great Cardinal player for a long time. I decided that I wanted to highlight one of my favorite Cardinal players instead of having a backup catcher. So I went with 2009 Brendan Ryan. No one would say he was the best shortstop, but the guy can pick it at short,
mm-hmm.
and he played hard, and he was just a great defender, and he actually hit that one year, and then the Mariners paid him, and then he stunk.
He had a strong mustache game and a strong stirrup game.
Yes, no, he was what they would call a grinder, and he just played really well for the Cardinals that one year, and only that 1 year. And then Colton Wong, another great fielding middle infielder. He hits the ball very hard for someone who doesn't hit home runs. And those are my two guys that I just have to have on there because I apparently really like sweet fielding middle infielders.
And then the pitching staff, I see a lot of similarities as well.
Yeah, the pitching staff, I mean, you have to keep Wainwright, Carpenter on there in different years, but again, they both had 5 to 10 year stretches where they were all-stars almost every year. Carlos Martinez had a really good year in 2016. That was an easy pick. In 2015, I had a tough choice. I kind of wanted to put a lefty on there. And Jaime Garcia was a pretty good lefty for the Cardinals, but John Lackey had a better year that year. And then finally, I have the Lizard King, Miles Michaelis. He picked that up in the Japanese League, and I mean, the Lizard King. I don't know what else I need to say. He also had 20 wins that year.
There's not a lot of great nicknames in baseball anymore, so yeah, it is nice to see a great nickname there.
Yeah, I mean, he came over from Japan. It was his first year. He played really well. 18-4, 108. He only gave up 186 hits, the lowest walk per 9 ratio out there. It was an all-star after not being in major leagues for 4 years, and his previous year in Texas did not end well. So he's a guy that really won over the Cardinals after not being in Major League Baseball for a while.
And the bullpen looks very similar.
Yeah, our bullpens, I mean, it was easy because once you figured out which years you wanted for your major leaguer, for your batters, I mean, the bullpen really fell into place. I mean, Hanky, Heathcliff Slocum, his name is Heathcliff Slocum, you can't say Slocum, it's a 2-name tag. Jason Isringhausen and Fernando Salas, all great relievers. Now that I think about it, Fernando Salas would be my closer.
Okay.
He was the guy with the best stuff.
Okay.
And then I also have Todd Wellemeyer from 08, Dave Ferris, a nice little lefty from 2000, and another lefty, imagine that, more lefties out of the Cardinal bullpen, Steve Klein, who had a 2.7 WAR that year. So they liked their lefties, and they got a lot of strikeouts. So they've always had a decent bullpen. That was definitely Tony La Russa special.
Yeah, so a lot of similarities, a lot of the same players. We went different years. It kind of highlights, the puzzle that you're putting together when you put one of these rosters together. And yeah, if you get one player 1 year, that kind of creates a opportunity for other players. And I think that's how you were able to get Holiday and Brian Jordan on there.
And for some of these players, I had to put them on the roster and then figure out a year for them because as a fan, you kind of feel differently. Like with Tommy Pham, I love Tommy Pham, but he had one good year for the Cardinals, so I could never start him for my 25-year Cardinals lineup.
Well, it's perfect. You have Holiday out there to start, and then they got the lead, and you put Pham out there for defensive purposes.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of these guys are also really good defenders, other than Matt Holiday, so they can cover more ground. Yeah,
and then you mentioned though you cheated a little bit. You didn't have a backup catcher, and that was one of the positions that I struggled with. I mentioned it. Yachty has been there for so long. He's been the starting catcher since like 05. He got called up, made his debut in 04. So you got to go way back.
Yeah, he made 10 All-Star games in 11 years. He was 3rd and 4th in the MVP. So, I mean, he's obviously your starter. And they've only had 2 or 3 other starters in the last 25 years. You got Mike Matheny, you got Pagliazzi.
Yeah, and they were not much offensively. Matheny was known for his defense. But yeah, so it was tough to really find a backup catcher,
especially when he played games. They have a lot of backup catchers. And the thing about Molina, if you look at his games played, he's always playing 130, 140 games. And that is impressive considering that he is not the best athlete in the world.
Yeah, and the other Well, it depends how you define athlete.
That's true.
But he is, you mentioned a couple guys who I wanted to get on my roster who I didn't. Brian Jordan, he had some very good years, but it just didn't line up with my roster needs. And Matt Holliday, same thing, guy could mash. And the other guy who we have not mentioned yet, although he has not been a Cardinal for very long, and he also comes from a position of depth at first base, is Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah, he's been okay. I almost feel like we might be going in the reverse of the Pujols deal here, where we got the guy at the end of his career, but the guy can still hit, and he fields really well, and he's still not that old. He's been okay. The one guy who I really wanted to put on here, but really could not find a spot, is David Eckstein. You gotta love that scrappy.
Well, yeah, you got Brendan Ryan. I mean, how many scrappy middle infielders can you get? I love
those scrappy infielders, and David Eckstein was really good for a few years with the Cardinals. And
I mean, we're heavy on the Cardinals-Angels connection on this episode.
Well, the Cardinals and the Angels just have a lot of players that played on both teams, and I just think that's interesting because the Cardinals have gotten the better part of most of them.
Yeah, certainly Pujols. I mean, Lackey was huge in that 0-2 World Series. Eckstein was huge in that 0-2 World Series.
Yeah, and also Adam Kennedy was a Cardinal that was traded to the Angels.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, but we go back. And then the other guy, Matt Carpenter, yeah, you got him in 2013. That was definitely the better year than I got in 2018. I took, the dominant loogie out of the pen, Seagrass that year. He of the, .45 ERA.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
So yeah, it is tough. Again, listeners out there, you can point out the mistakes. Maybe we'll have a side-by-side comparison with my roster and Charlie's roster, and you guys can vote on who you think is better. But yeah, so Charlie, was it tough fitting all the pieces into the puzzle as you made your roster?
It was tougher than I thought it would be, mostly with the relievers, because with a good team, you have to have good relievers. And luckily for the Cardinals, they've had good relievers, even in years where they weren't playing well. Even in 2011, when they won the World Series, no one had a really good WAR that year. No one was really. I mean, I was considering John Jay because just other than Yadier Molina, they didn't have the batting stats or anything like that. So I picked Salas that year, and he had a really good year. So the Cardinals have a benefit of being a very strong team at a lot of positions. So that was probably the hardest part, was figuring out who to play shortstop. And McGuire and Pujols, you're not going to find another duo like that. It's going to be really difficult to find another duo in the league where you have two guys that are MVP caliber at the same position. So it was enlightening to see how good the Cardinals have been.
Yeah, so I, encourage all of our listeners out there to take on this endeavor, make your own roster. It's a fun little activity. And yeah, let me have it, let Charlie have it, what you think of our rosters. Now, Charlie, let's get into the Q&A section of the program. We pose questions on our Twitter and Instagram each week, asking for questions that you may have about the team that you want us to get to. So make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at BoxSeatBanter. But before we get to our listener-submitted questions, I want to play the Hall of Fame game with you, Charlie. I've got some, because as you mentioned earlier, they've kind of been several players who are the Hall of Very Good, and let's kind of discuss their Hall of Fame candidacy. Before we do, though, I want to get your opinion on the Hall of Fame. Are you because the baseball is the kind of strictest Hall of Fame to get into. Are your thoughts in line with that? Are you a small Hall of Fame guy? Are you a big Hall of Fame guy?
I like to think that I'm picky. Do I think that Andre Dawson should be in the Hall of Fame? Maybe, but at the same time, there's some guys that were playing in the 40s and 50s would never make the Hall of Fame now. And like George Kell, look up George Kell's stats right now, and you'll be like, how did this guy make it to the Hall of Fame? And then you got the compilers, guys who played for forever, who probably weren't the best catcher or the best pitcher, but they played for a long time and racked up a lot of wins. So I think I like to think that I am a small Hall of Fame guy. So I might be kind of rough on my Cardinals here.
All right, I lean small Hall of Fame as well. I think you really got to be the elite of the elite. And so let's get started. Obviously, Pujols we don't have to discuss.
No.
He's a first ballot. He's an inner circle Hall of Famer.
Yes.
One of the greats to play the game. He may be a unanimous selection when he gets to it.
He should be. If he's not, I'll be very disappointed.
But so now let's get to the more questionable ones who have it shot. And we'll start with Yachty. What do you think?
So Yachty, I mean, he's played a long time. I mean, not many catchers, have started when they're 21 and played till they're 37. And guys like Johnny Bench didn't do that. But Johnny Bench also played way better. So Yadier belongs on the compiler end of things. I mean, he's a 10-time All-Star. He's never won the MVP. He was a pretty good singles hitter and doubles, but he was never a big home run guy. I really want to put him in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think I can. And I don't think he will make it unless there's a lot of guys who really enjoy fielding.
Yeah, I think his comp almost is not a catcher, but another player who came from a position, very important position, who is phenomenal defensively, not so great offensively.
I see where you're going with this.
Ozzie Smith.
Yeah.
Ozzie Smith, greatest defensive shortstop all time, not a great hitter, but he could get by with the stick.
I also think part of it is that Ozzie Smith was everyone's favorite, and I think some people have a problem with Yadier Molina. He has a little bit more of an attitude than Ozzie Smith did, but I really want him to make the Hall of Fame, but I don't think he will.
I agree with you. I think he's a little short in his qualifications, but we can agree that he is in the Hall of Very Good.
Yes.
Then we'll stay on the infield. Scott Rowland.
So Scott Rowland's one of those guys who won Rookie of the Year. Played a lot of seasons, but he didn't have, his peak of 5 years here, let's see, from 2002 to 2006, he went to the All-Star game 5 times. He won a Gold Glove 4 times. He won a Silver Slugger once. But after that, and before that, he really did not play that well, and his peak wasn't good enough to put him in the Hall of Fame. So that's a solid no for me.
Well, looking at his kind of Hall of Fame qualifications, you talk about that peak. His 7-year peak in WAR was 43.6, which if you compare that to the 15 third basemen in the Hall of Fame, the average 7-year peak is 43.1. So he's right in line with that. And his career WAR is just, again, right in line. His career WAR is 70.1. Where the average third baseman is 68.4. Phenomenal defense.
Yeah, the defense, I never got to see Brooks Robinson play, but I assumed that he was comparable to Brooks Robinson out in the field, and he hit way better than Brooks Robinson. So if that's what you're looking at, then he probably should be in the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't have the fanfare, for one thing. No one's asking for Scott Rowland to be in the Hall of Fame. Especially with guys like Bonds and McGuire and Clemens all waiting. He might be stuck waiting for a while.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets in ever, but I think he's got a very strong case. I'm not going to lose any sleep if he doesn't get in. I, again, think he's at the very least Hall of Very Good.
Yes.
But I think he's got a strong case, and I think he's deserving of a vote. I don't know if I had, that ballot in front of me. I don't know if I'd check off his box, but
Yeah,
I'd think long and hard about it.
I might be picky, but I'd be one of those guys who'd use all 10 of my votes every year. Even if I knew they weren't going to make it, I would still use 10 votes because these guys deserve the votes even if they don't quite make it out of the Hall of Very Good.
All right, and then now we'll get to Mark McGwire. What do you think?
I'm one of those guys who thinks everyone back then was on PEDs, and if he was hitting guys who were pitching with PEDs, then he doesn't need to be thought of as the PED guy. He played really well for a long time, a lot of all-star games. I mean, if you think of it, 1998 he hits the 70 home runs. The next year he hit 65. In 2 years he's out of the league. I mean, he just fell apart physically, probably because of the steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, how many guys do you know led the league in OBP, slugging, OPS plus, and home runs? But it wasn't his 98 year. He did it again in Oakland. He's a Hall of Famer, even if he's had an iron glove. He's a Hall of Famer. It's a matter of time.
See, I think he's one who, I know he hit those 49 home runs as a rookie in Oakland, but he's a guy that I don't think accumulates the stats if he were not on the sauce. Barry Bonds, everyone says he's a Hall of Famer before he got on the sauce, which is true. McGwire, I don't know if you can say that, and that's why he has.
I mean, his Hall of Fame resume is based on that 98 season on top of being very good for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, over 500 home runs, so he's got those career numbers. He's got the single season. If he did not have, if this was all completely legitimate, he'd be slam dunk Hall of Famer.
Right.
But yeah, I think people think that it was all, not all of it, but he was kind of based on that. And so without the assistance that he had pharmaceutically, he would not have been able to put up those numbers. So unlike Bonds and Clemens, who were great before we think that they started using, McGwire was never really that elite player. And who knows when he started using, because he was playing with Canseco in Oakland, so who's to say when he started?
Yeah, Balco was always there, so yeah, who knows? I still think he deserves to be in though.
All right, then we'll get to the outfield. I've got Jim Edmonds. What do you think?
I love Jim Edmonds. I really do. He's not a Hall of Famer. His 7-year peak, again, very good. From 98 to 05, he was excellent. He was a top 5 MVP getter. He won a Gold Glove a bunch of times. Like I said before, he made flashy plays. He didn't always make the best play possible. He's a great color guy, though. He's a TV color guy for the Cardinals, and maybe he'll make the Hall of Fame for that, because he probably will not make it as a center fielder.
I agree. I don't think he is a Hall of Famer. Then we'll finish up with Adam Wainwright.
I like Adam Wainwright a lot. He's played for a long time. He's played in multiple positions. He was a great closer.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great starting pitcher. His 7-year peak, not that great. He had some injuries in 2011. I think he had Tommy John. But he's led the league in wins a couple times. The guy's thrown over 2,000 innings. He's never going to get above 200 wins. And that's really tough for a pitcher. If you're not going to get 200 wins at this point, you better be someone like Roy Halladay. And I even think Roy Halladay might have gotten there. It's not looking like he can put up the stats. At the same time, I mean, if you've seen pitching over the last few seasons, it's not like pitchers are getting very many innings. Other than guys like Lance Lynn and Kershaw, who will go out there and pitch 7, most guys get 6 or 5. So maybe he can get in somewhere where the pitching stock that is in the Hall of Fame pool isn't very good. Because he's the leader of the Cardinals. He's a great player, but he's not a Hall of Famer right now.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think he's in. So out of these guys, we're not really thinking any of them get in. Who do you think's got the best shot out of those 5?
You really sold me on Scotty Rowland. I still think Yadier has the best chance because as a catcher, it'll be him and Posey coming out at around the same time, and maybe they both. I mean, they're the 2 best catchers in the last 20 years, basically. I mean, you have good hitters like Piazza, and Joe Mauer was really good, but the catchers have not played a long time and hit as well as those 2. So maybe they could go in at the same time, and that'd be good for Yachty because he needs a little bit of marketing help, I think.
All right, so now we'll get to a question now, sticking with Yachty. This question comes from Alfredo Papadakis, and, kind of going back to what you were mentioning earlier, how, the Cardinals don't really have like a true ace. They have 5 really good pitchers. Well, Alfredo's question, would the pitching staff be as successful if they did not have Yadier behind the plate? Yes, they have had great pitchers, but Molina is the foundation. So what do you think about that?
I have to agree. In the league, when you see bad catchers, you typically see not as good pitching. He is really good at controlling his pitchers. He goes out, before the mound visit rule changes, he was out there all the time, which is why Cardinal games would take 4 hours all the time between him. And then before that with La Russa, games would take forever. But he had the game under control all the time. He's one of the most intelligent players out there every game. And I think part of it is also he speaks Spanish really well. He's Puerto Rican, and that helps with both the American and the Spanish-speaking pitchers. So, yes, I 100% agree that Yadier Molina is probably the second most important Cardinal in the last 25 years.
Yeah, and I've heard stories about him, taking players under his wing, and not just other pitchers or catchers, but infielders and like minor league infielders who weren't really a prospect even.
Yeah.
And him just kind of taking them under his wing, showing them the ropes, being a great teammate, a great leader.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's a story about it's a Cardinal chemistry thing between him and Wainwright. There's a story a couple years ago where one of my whole high school teammates was playing. He was a reliever. He was on AA team. He didn't have a car in Florida. So Wainwright rents a car for him for the rest of the spring training. And that's the kind of thing the Cardinals have done with their clubhouse with Wainwright and Molina. When they go, there's going to be a huge hole.
Yeah, we've talked about the longevity that they've had at the GM with the managers, but yeah, they've also had a huge level of stability behind the plate with Yachty.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Even Posey, who's been around forever, is getting hurt now, and you probably won't see him behind the plate very much longer.
Well, yeah, Posey came up in 2010. Yachty's been around
since 05, really.
05, so he's been. He got called up in 04.
Yeah.
He's got much more longevity than Posey has. And the last thing that I wanted to ask you was, what do Cardinals fans think of Joe Buck? Because I know, he has those Cardinals ties.
He does.
His dad was the broadcaster. Jack Buck broadcast for the Cardinals. And I think that the national broadcasters get a lot of hate from the fans. They always think that, he's doing a national game, and they always think that he's a homer for the other team, and this, he's rooting for the, he might be doing a Dodgers-Yankees game, and the Dodgers fans are like, he's being a homer, he's favoring the Yankees, and the Yankees fans are saying the same thing, but the opposite, he's being a Dodger fan, so.
Yeah, so Joe Buck and Tim McCarver, both Cardinals blood.
Right.
Were the MLB on Fox guys for a long time. Joe Buck, I know what you were just saying, whenever the Cardinals are on Fox, everybody thinks he's pro Cardinals. And sometimes I could feel it. From what I know, St. Louis fans really like Buck. he's a great announcer. I mean, I would like to say that he's the best national announcer out there right now for baseball. Joe Davis is very good at national team games too, but I think Joe Buck might be the best announcer out there, and Cardinal fans are really happy to have him in the family, even if he doesn't stay at home anymore.
All right, so they love their Joe Buck there in St. Louis. Again, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Boxseat Banter on both platforms. And watch out for when we ask those questions and submit your questions. Next week, we'll be looking for questions on the Padres. Charlie, what do you think of the Cardinals roster that I've created? How would you grade it? Maybe some strengths and weaknesses. What do you think? And you can also, compare it to the one that you made.
Yeah, so, I mean, having the Cardinals as a team to make this lineup for makes life a lot easier. You got some really good players to pick from. I would pick some little nitpicks with you about your outfield. I'm not a huge fan of Tommy Pham and J.D. Drew starting for that all-time 25-year team. I'd rather have guys who played for the Cardinals a longer time, like Holiday and Brian Jordan. But your lineup is great. The fielders are great. The pitching, you picked all the right guys. And my lineup's a little better. But this is an A- team. It's not A+ because, like we said earlier, their Hall of Very Good is strong.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be A+ to be in the Hall of Fame. And that's not where this roster is. Where do you think it might squad?
I think I liked how you got Holiday and Brian Jordan on there. Your offense, it's tough to say. I think you got a better year with Carpenter. Pujols will get a great year regardless. So it's probably pretty similar. You might have a slight edge offensively. I think my starters might be a little better because I was able to get Flaherty in there. I'd take Flaherty over the Lizard King. And then our bullpens are pretty similar. So, it's you might have a slight edge offensively. I think I've got a slight edge in the rotation. It's tough to say, who would be better. Might even out a little bit.
Yeah, they're good rosters. You have great players to pick from. I know I favorited Brendan Ryan there. And he's definitely not one of the top 25 players. I mean, he's probably their 4th best shortstop, maybe 5th best shortstop. But you gotta pick your favorite sometime.
Yeah, although, and I know that you mentioned Yachty's durability. I don't know if he's able to catch 162 games. I might have the advantage there with a backup catcher.
Yeah. If we're playing 7 games, I got a good shot. If we're playing 162, we're gonna have to catch with Brendan Ryan back there.
Now, as I grade my roster, there's, even though you may have had a slight advantage with Holiday and Brian Jordan, I mean, this team has a lot of offense. They are, just 2 home runs behind the Yankees for the most home runs as a team. So a lot of power there.
Yep.
They've got the best on-base percentage, the most walks. They've got above-average rate stats there. And they got solid defensively. And then looking at the pitchers, I think the rotation is just kind of average. Like we've mentioned, they don't have like a true ace. And ideally, over 25 years, you would have multiple aces. Wainwright and Carpenter are very good. Yep. Flaherty, might become the best out of the bunch, and he certainly was dominant in the second half last year.
Yeah. And it's funny about Flaherty because, he was in the high school team with Lucas Giolito and Max Fried, and he went the same year.
No, he was a sophomore. He was sophomore when they were seniors.
So he went the next year as a second-round pick after those 2 went top 5 the year before. And it's looking like he might be the best pitcher out of the bunch. And also with the other starting pitchers for the Cardinals, they're not a big strikeout.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Rizzo is a pitch-to-contact guy. and War loves strikeouts.
That's true.
So that might underrate them a little bit because Carpenter and Wainwright in their prime were ace level pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't get the love from War that other ace level pitchers get.
Yeah, they did have, let's see, their cumulative ERA about 2.5 as a staff, so that's above average there. With those starters, as I mentioned, not being as dominant as some of the other pitching staffs, but with the strength of the offense, I think they're a solid B. I wouldn't put them into that A range, but yeah, I give them a solid B. Again, if you guys want to chime in with how you would grade my roster, let me know, and yeah, grade Charlie's roster as well. And yeah, you can compare and contrast them. Let me hear it. I want to see your opinions on these rosters.
Yeah, please do.
Charlie, as we wrap up here, why don't you go ahead and share your final thoughts on the Cardinals?
I gotta say that I'm a lucky fan. There's a lot of really good players here. I mean, I got to see the prime of Pujols. You got to see the prime of Molina. The Scotty Rowland came over from the Phillies and gave really good years. Jim Edmonds came over from the Angels, gave really good years. Mark McGwire came over from the A's and gave really good years. They've really shown a lot of ability to bring players through their system as well. Guys like Tommy Pham, Matt Carpenter, Carlos Martinez, and Jack Flaherty, all guys who came up, and Waino as well. Even though technically he was traded as a prospect, he really made his bones with the Cardinals. So they're just a great team to root for, and they have really good players. And I hope that they don't get COVID again this year because I want to continue to watch them.
Yeah, I want to finish up and just say that they are a solid, well-run organization. And, they're almost always a factor. They're always in the hunt. That's all you can ask for as a fan. The Cardinals, the self-appointed best fans in baseball.
Yeah, sometimes for better or for worse.
But they are one of the premier organizations in baseball. We don't need to go into who all those organizations are, but the Cardinals are one of them. And, they're a team that, could and should be emulated by other teams. So it was fun looking back and seeing who they've had, seeing kind of what's made them successful. And I think, the main thing is that stability that they've had.
Exactly. And
so it was fun to look back. It was great to have you join me to discuss it and look back on that. Again, Charlie, you can find him on Twitter at SirCharles_OG. It's funny that you call yourself an OG when you're the fourth.
That's true. That's irony for you.
Okay. So yeah, you can find him on Twitter. You can let him know what you think about his roster. You can follow us on Twitter at Boxseat Banter and also on Instagram. So Charlie, again, thanks for joining the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a great time.
All right. Make sure to follow us and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us and review us. That really helps.
5 stars though. Anything below that, I don't think you actually like the podcast. So
well,
5 stars only.
It's clearly a 5-star podcast, so that's probably all they would give us.
If we could put grade 80, we could, but 5 stars will do.
All right. Now, again, thanks for listening. Charlie, thanks for joining. This is Billy Ballas of Box Seat Banter, signing off.